hold it like that. Got a microphone. I have 3 passions. My 3 P's, if you will. Pokemon, pro wrestling, and pronunciation. Today, I want to talk about 2 of those P's, Pokemon and pronunciation. I think it's about time I get some good use out of my English degree. $30,000 of student debt. It is what it is. So like this video and leave a comment telling me how much student debt you have and how you're coping. Anyway, let's get to the topic at hand. How do we pronounce the Alpha Pokemon's name? Is it God or Jod? That's a dumb joke. I was so proud of that joke when I first wrote it. This is a very tepid debate in the Pokemon community, and nobody in the linguistics community is even talking about it. But in the Pokemon linguistics community, Population 1, this is the biggest debate we have going. How do we pronounce this creature's name? Is it Arceus or Arseus? Let's talk about it. Before we get started, I will not be discussing the pronunciations Arceus or Arceus because they're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. And you should feel guilty for pronouncing it that way. So, why is this debated the way that it is? There's no real discussion online about any other Pokemon's pronunciation besides maybe my pronunciation of Ampharos. And why? From Bulbapedia's trivia section, according to the animated series dub's then voice director Tom Wayland, the dub chose to pronounce Arceus with a hard C instead of a soft C due to concerns over the latter pronunciation's potential implications in British English-speaking territories. I wish that Bulbapedia would source things, but whatever. Alright, that settles it. But why do people keep insisting on the pronunciation Arceus? First time I heard it was an official Pokemon game, Battle Revolution, and I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Arceus? Arceus! Arceus! Arceus is sent out.
Often the first pronunciation you hear will sort of dictate your personal pronunciation moving forward. And there had to be a reason they said Arceus in official Pokemon game Battle Revolution, right? I'm gonna go over the arguments for each pronunciation, and then I'll give you a short linguistics lesson to support both arguments. I'm also gonna provide counter-arguments when I think it's necessary. So both pronunciations have a lot of supporting arguments, mostly based in etymology. One pronunciation has a lot of evidence and a specific argument that people love to use as their ace. The other pronunciation has less support, but I think stronger arguments. Let's start with the pronunciation Arceus. I think the basic argument for this pronunciation is how it looks. In particular, the last 3 letters, EUS. This combination of 3 in this order is common in Greek words, Roman words, and species names. There is a lot about Arceus' design and lore that screams Greek, Roman, species names. Most examples I can find of words with CEUS are pronounced Seus. Here are a few examples that I'm about to absolutely butcher. It's a Pokemon pronunciation, it's not a Greek word pronunciation video. Erinaceius, Caduceus, Amerinaceius, and Menoeceus. It's with the S sound, an unvoiced alveolar fricative consonant. That's right, we're getting deep into the mouth. Open up, baby. Some got that sh sound like sebaceous. Most of the words you can find with CEUS have little to no connection to Arceus besides their Greek origins. I looked for words that have a hard C and EUS, which there are a few, but the C is usually accompanied by something like an L or H. So in terms of how English words naturally work and the precedent set by Greek and Roman words, it seems like Arceus is our answer. I cannot find a single word with CEUS that is pronounced Chaos. A fair counter-argument to this is that just because there is a precedent set for it doesn't mean that it's always gonna be like that. Look at Blastoise, for example. Just look at him. That's a Pokemon worthy of being called Daddy. We don't pronounce Blastoise the same way that we pronounce tortoise. Just because it's the same spelling and there is a precedent doesn't mean that it has to be that way. After all, we are talking about a fictional god llama, so rules don't apply here. Another argument for Arceus is its Japanese name, Arseus.
Pokémon Legends, Arceus.
For those who don't know, I can read, write, and speak Japanese, so I feel like that gives me some credibility when it comes to discussing the Japanese names of Pokemon. Most Japanese Pokemon names that carry over to English try to keep the original pronunciation as close as possible. A few examples are Pikachu, Kyogre, Jirachi, Reshiram, Miraidon, and Pachirisu. I want you to know I just pronounced all those names in Japanese, and you probably know the exact Pokemon I'm talking about. If I say Arceus, you know what I'm talking about. Within context. I think it's very important that the original pronunciation of Arceus is the Japanese pronunciation, and the lack of any sort of k sound is telling. When they make the jump to English, consonants are rarely changed, while vowels are sort of adapted to fit the language best. Most legendary Pokemon, with a few exceptions, are basically Englishified versions of their Japanese names. Here's a list of some legendary Pokemon that are essentially the same in both Japanese and English. Mewtwo, Entei, Suicune, Latias, Latios, Wooper, Palkia, Dialga, Heatran, Reshiram, Zekrom, Paldean Wooper, Cobalion, Cosmog. I'm not gonna name them all, but do you get the point? Solgaleo, Miraidon. Okay, I'm done. But there's still so much more. A counter-argument for this is, once again, not all the time, and just because there's a rule doesn't mean there can't be an exception. Uxie is Yuxi in Japanese, and Tapu Koko is Kapu Kokeko. One is a vowel change, and the other is basically the same name, just organized differently. These arguments are taking a look at the word spelled Arceus and trying to find the most logical way to pronounce it. These don't necessarily take into account the word's meaning or origin. That's not to say that those arguments don't exist for Arceus, but they're more prevalent for Arceus. So now, let's take a look at Arceus' supporting arguments and evidence. When we look at the word spelled Arceus, what are we looking at? What does it mean? Pokemon names are often, but not always, a mixture of two or more words to make at best a portmanteau and at worst a pun, which are God's cruel pranks on linguistics. Now, if we go on the assumption that Game Freak used foreign languages like English to make the word Arceus, here's a list of words on Bulbapedia that we can work with. Arc, Alpha, Deuce, Zeus, Arcane, Aureus, Arc, Arceus, Arceus, or Chaos. That's a lot of words that we're looking at here, but let's take a look at the words that have our controversial voiceless velar stop. Arcane, which means known or knowable to only a few people. This works especially with the lore. Arceus is not a Pokemon that many people know of, so I think this is a great word to explain its etymology. Arc, which has a lot of different uses, so I'm not exactly sure how strong of an argument it's meant to be. There are definitions I've seen that can be applied, but I think throwing in so many words like this can kind of make your argument look desperate, especially if they're weak. One good word is much better than 4 or 5 mid words. Arc might be a reach. But it's got an arc! Look at the arc! Yeah, okay. Arceus is one of my favorite words for this argument. It means to summon, invite, or invoke. Once again, I think this works, but it does feel like a slight reach. And I think a falsehood with Arceus is that it's Latin. I can't think of any other Japanese Pokemon names that are influenced by Latin. This is partly because I don't speak and haven't studied Latin. In this instance, Arceus is more of a justification for the official English pronunciation rather than the word spelled Arceus. Arceus is a term used in alchemy to refer to the lower and most dense aspect of the astral plane, which presides over the growth and continuation of all living things. What? Arceus is the glue between the spiritual and physical. Fun fact, alchemy is really obscure in Japan. I can't find almost anything on it besides Full Metal Alchemist, so I feel like this is the weakest argument of them all. Please delete it from the Bulbapedia page. Arceus does not come from Arceus. And last but not least is Chaos, the ancient Greek term meaning mythological void state preceding the creation of the universe. Hell yeah, that is some metal as hell. Etymology, I am 100% down to allow Chaos in my Arceus lore. But the only issue with the word Chaos is that it would only be offering the k sound, and practically nothing else. You can argue K, but I think it's a bit of a stretch. Some of these definitely fit and support the pronunciation Arceus, even if that support is as stable as a drunken game of Jenga. But this assumes a few things. It assumes that Game Freak was using foreign words to make the name Arseus. That's not unheard of, as Haunter's name is literally Ghost, and Umbreon's name is Blackie. Also, Groudon's Japanese name is basically Groudon, so legendary Pokemon are not exempt from having foreign languages sneak into their etymology. It also assumes that these words are being used when there's a chance that they're not. For example, Squirtle's name is likely a mixture of Squirt and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Wait, what? Just Turtle? Yeah, that makes more sense. This makes sense, but it's still assuming a likelihood. Unless the people who named Squirtle come out and tell us, yes, that was it, there's no knowing 100%. Squirtle's name might come from Squirm and Chortle. It's probably not that, but we can't be 100% sure. When you talk about the words that might make up Pokemon names, you are only speculating, even if your speculation is likely correct. The word likely leaves some room for error. I think the genuine likelihood for some of these words to be the origin for the word Arceus is low, and I think a lot of these words came up later to try to justify the official English pronunciation. There's also all the in-game evidence that cannot be ignored or denied. Like, the localized versions of these games have busted their butts to let you know that it is Arceus whether you like it or not. For example, Savali's signature ability, Arceus System. That straight up gives you your answer to our pronunciation conundrum. I have no counter-arguments against this except for its Japanese name, AR System. The number one rule in language is, it's all arbitrary. Okay, maybe not the number one rule, but I need you to follow me for just a little bit here. English is a terrible mismatch of modern and virtually extinct languages that essentially make a Taco Bell menu item of a language. There are rules in English, but humans don't and won't follow those rules because language is an ever-evolving beast, like the Taco Bell menu. There's a reason why we don't speak Old English anymore. There's no telling what the long-term effect the internet will have, but there's a chance that the English we speak now will sound biblical in 500 years. Unless we wipe each other out first. You know. In English linguistics, we have prescriptivists and descriptivists. Prescriptivists are essentially strict rule followers. We talk in English in this way because the rules dictate so. The arguments I showed you for Arceus were prescriptivist talking points. Descriptivists are in a different boat, and they allow the natural course of language to dictate the rules. I think the arguments for Arceus are best supported with a descriptivist mindset. People are trying to explain the official pronunciation. These are two schools of thought, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can want to be able to explain what's going on in English by citing the rules, but that's not going to stop you from being absolutely fascinated with the word ain't. What is going on here? Whoa. Gets me all, it's a green screen though, so it's not, there's nothing actually here. I fooled you. Movie magic. I consider myself a descriptivist. As a boy whose accent and dialect is influenced by living in Kansas, Colorado, and Japan, and being partially deaf, I have no choice but to try to find explain the oddities in the English that I use. However, I also know we can't just ignore the rules completely. If a word changes in a natural sense, I'm all for change and letting nature run its course. For example, let's just change how we spell a hamster because everyone is putting a P right here. Let's just do it. Screw it. Let's go nuts. I don't care. But it has to be natural and make sense. The way that Arceus is spelled leads to only one natural pronunciation. So how do you pronounce this god Pokemon's name? What is its God-given name? It is undeniably Arceus, because that is the official statement from Pokemon. No amount of well thought out, properly researched evidence is gonna change canon. No matter how badly I want Gimli and Legolas to be lovers, the canon dictates they're just bros. But Pokemon's official canon is straight up incorrect. There's a reason this gets brought up so much and people question their pronunciation. And it's because every rule and precedent of English we have that applies to this word predicates it is pronounced Arceus. There's a reason why this debate is a thing, and it's because Pokemon is wrong. Pokemon is technically correct because they make the rules, but they are wrong. And I think people pulling words out like Arceus, alchemy, and chaos have the reach of Muhammad Ali, but the knockout power of Glass Joe. Don't get me wrong, I love speculating about this kind of stuff, and I love talking about how Pokemon lore could very well influence the name of a Pokemon. But lore speculation is not hard linguistic evidence, so stop presenting your obscure as hell Arceus as evidence for your wrong pronunciation. If it was truly Arceus, it'd be spelled differently. Pokemon names, especially Japanese Pokemon names, are usually pretty simple. My personal theory is that Arceus is just Alpha and Zeus put together, but they just knocked off the 10 from Z to make it Se, so the word becomes Arceus. Arseus just sounds gross. It's hard to find a lot of Japanese Pokemon names that made the jump to English with changes as drastic as Arceus to Arceus, especially legendary Pokemon. And yes, I'd argue that changing one consonant sound is much more drastic than changing a bunch of vowels because vowels know no bounds and do whatever they want. Consonants are a lot more strict and sort of serve as the skeletons for our words. One example of an exception is this guy, and if this does well, I want to do a video on how to pronounce Sky Snake because people's pronunciation is just all over the map. But the number one thing that I want you to take from this is that pronunciation is it's arbitrary. If you say a word and people know what you're saying, then it doesn't really matter how you pronounce it. Arceus, 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 Arseus, Arceus, Arseus. There are so many factors that will inform how or why you pronounce something the way that you do. But I once heard someone pronounce Gyarados Girardidos, and I stopped hanging out with that guy. True story. You could pronounce Arceus either way, and I think that you would be correct and wrong either way. Arceus is correct because the lore dictates so, but it also requires Arceus to be the exception to so many linguistic and localization rules and precedents set that it almost seems ridiculous. Arceus is correct because of the rules of the English language, but it also requires you to rebel against the official pronunciation. You rebel scum? Looking good. Open up that mouth and show me what you... Sorry, it's so unprofessional. I keep my phone in my back pocket while I record because it's easy access to my script. I guess you could call it my ass pocket. Or for my British viewers out there, you probably would say arse pocket. And that would make this my arse phone. Arse phone. Arse phone. Arse phone. Nobody calls it Arse Phone unless they're being cheeky and taking the piss. Just because words come from words doesn't mean it's pronounced the same way. It's the context of the rest of the word that dictates its pronunciation. May I remind you of Blastoise and Tortoise? We don't say Blastus. Words can come from other words and take on completely different pronunciations. Of course it's Arc Phone, regardless of how we pronounce Arceus, because name a single word in the English dictionary that ends with C and is pronounced S. Go ahead, look it up. No, wait, I've done it for you. You don't have to. There's none. Oh, but I did a quick Google search and found ace. That's not a word! Every time I bring up this argument, my friends always scoff and go, how do you pronounce the phone in Legends Arceus? Like they fucking got me. And every time I have this unquenchable urge to just punch him in the dick. This is your only warning. And if you are a chick who lacks a dick to be punched, congratulations! I'm just gonna punch you in the mouth. So that is my conclusion. There is no 100% answer because whoever translated Arceus to Arceus messed up. They messed up big. Pronounce it how you want to, and if you ever get flack for your pronunciation, send this video to your bullies. Or punch them in the dick. And subscribe to this channel. Let me know how you pronounce Arceus and your thoughts on everything. Not just Arceus, but everything. The housing crisis, propaganda in children's cartoons, best Pop-Tart, everything. Okay. So first off, I want to thank Potomax for editing this video. He did an excellent job, and quite frankly, I don't think I could do what he did. He's a French-Canadian YouTuber, and I think it's kind of odd that I handed off the reins of an English linguistics video to someone who's from arguably the worst part of France. If you enjoyed this video and got this far, thank you and subscribe. And also, what's wrong with you? I've been wanting to make a video about Legends Arceus since it first came out, but I'll be honest, I'm pretty self-conscious about the way that I pronounce Arceus. If I make a video talking about what has become my favorite main series Pokemon game, essentially half of the comments are just going to be about my pronunciation of the title. I can already see it, so I wanted to make a video discussing why people pronounce it this way, and that ultimately, it doesn't matter. One more time, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed me discussing Pokemon, then maybe you'd like one of my Pokemon-themed Japan travel vlogs. I have a really big one coming out pretty soon, and I promise it's gonna be real good. So, yeah. Here, we gotta try what that YouTube thing. Let's take the hat off. And let's...